Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are looking at a date that might just end up being bolded in the history of Tuesday, January 2026.
It really feels like that.
If you woke up and checked the trade papers this morning, or even just, scrolled through social media, you probably got the sense that we are standing on the precipice of something massive.
It definitely feels like a before and after moment. We're looking at a cliff edge or, I don't know, a launch pad, depending on where you're sitting.
We're talking about what could be the single biggest shakeup in the entertainment industry since Disney bought Fox way back when.
Oh, easily on that scale.
We're talking about the potential acquisition of Warner Bros., Discovery, the studio, the library, the streaming business, all of it.
Everything.
By the giant itself, Netflix.
The big red N eating the shield. It's the consolidation event everyone sort of feared or maybe hoped for finally arriving.
Exactly. But here is the hook, the thing that stops this from just being dry M&A news about billionaires swapping assets. In a move that has surprised pretty much everyone, from the mailroom to the C-suite, Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos has come out with a core promise that goes against everything Netflix has stood for historically. He is committing to a full, traditional 45-day theatrical release window for Warner Bros.
That is a massive pivot. I can't overstate this.
Yeah.
For a decade, the Netflix philosophy was disruption.
Right, break things.
It was about collapsing the window, getting the content to the subscriber's living room instantly. The algorithm was God. And now the biggest streamer in the world is saying, actually, to make this work, we need to win the box office first.
And that is exactly why this matters to you, the listener. This isn't just about stock prices. This changes how you watch movies. It changes the actual quality of the films that get made.
For sure.
And frankly, it might determine whether the movie theater down the street from your house is still there in 2030.
The stakes are incredibly high. On one hand, you have this, this promise of a theatrical renaissance funded by Netflix. On the other hand, we have to look at the backdrop of it all.
Which is not great.
Not great at all. We are looking at production numbers for late 2025 that are, to put it mild, dire.
So our mission today is to unpack. Is Sarandos' promise genuine, or is it just corporate speak to get the deal through? We're going to look at the economic incentives behind putting movies in theaters versus, dumping them on streaming.
Right.
And we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of why Hollywood production seems to have just fallen off a cliff.
And I think we need to start with a healthy dose of skepticism. It's easy to get excited about savings, but we need to verify the math.
Okay, let's do that. Let's unpack this question. The headline is everywhere. Variety broke it down. Ted Sarandos says he wants to, quote, win the box office.
In the box.
He is explicitly saying that if they acquire Warner Bros., they aren't going to bury the studio's output on a server somewhere. They want that 45-day window.
Right. And to understand why that is so shocking, you have to look at the history. Netflix has historically viewed movie theaters with something ranging from indifference to open hostility.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
For a long time, theaters were seen as either irrelevant or just a marketing. Reed Hastings, the co-founder, he used to talk about movie theaters like they were fax machines.
Oh, I remember that.
Obsolete tech that people were clinging to out of nostalgia.
It was almost like they were personally offended that people still wanted to go out and see a movie.
Exactly. They treated theaters like a marketing billboard, not a real revenue. Think about Glass Onion. The Knives Out back in 2020.
Huge movie. I mean, everyone was talking about it.
And Netflix put it in theaters for 1 week, just 1 week. And they limited the screen count. It was a sneak peek. It wasn't about making money at the box office. It was about generating buzz so that people would subscribe to watch it later or, to qualify for Academy Awards.
I remember that so clearly. Theater owners were practically begging them to leave it in longer. They were selling out shows night after night. And Netflix just pulled the plug.
Estimates say they left something like $60 to $100 million on the table by pulling that movie.
$100 million.
Just walked away from it. But they didn't care because the metric that mattered to them was net subscriber addition. That was the only number they were.
So what changed? Why is Sarandos singing a completely different tune now?
Well, this is where we have to look at it through the lens of what our sources call the crisis actor perspective.
Crisis actor. Okay, that sounds ominous.
It isn't about conspiracy theories, I promise. It's a way of understanding corporate performance. The source suggests that corporate CEOs are, in a sense, actors.
What?
They tell the audience, whether that's Wall Street, the public, or government regulators, exactly what they need to hear to get what they want.
So they are playing a role, the role of the savior of cinema.
Precisely. The source material points out that it isn't necessarily a CEO's job, to be brutally honest. It's their job to close. So when Sarandos says, we love theaters, you have to ask, do they love theaters or do they love the idea of buying Warner Bros. Without the government blocking them?
okay. The antitrust angle. That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. If they went in saying, we're going to buy Warner Bros. And shut down all cinema distribution to feed our app, the Department of Justice would sue them before the ink was dry.
Of course.
It would be seen as destroying a competitor and ultimately hurt consumers. So promising to keep theaters alive is a strategic necessity. It's good PR.
So it's a tell them what they want to hear situation. But, okay, is there any data that supports this shift? Because it can't be just talk.
Well, there is.
They read a test case recently that kind of proved the money is real.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Stranger Things finale.
That is a crucial data point. This was the series finale event. They took the final 2 episodes of Stranger Things, cut them together like a feature film, put them in theater. It was a massive cultural moment.
And in just one weekend, it pulled in something like $25 million globally. That is huge for something you can, watch at home for free with your subscription.
It is. It proves the demand is absolute. But here is the kicker, and this is where the business side gets really messy.
Okay.
Netflix kept basically none of that money.
Wait, really? They made $25 million at the box office, didn't keep it? How does that even work?
Almost none of it. Because of industry clearances and union residuals, the contracts for Stranger Things were written years ago for streaming. They weren't set up for theatrical distribution for those revenue splits.
Oh, wow.
So to get it into theaters, Netflix had to make all these concessions where the exhibitors, the theaters, and the various rights holders took the vast majority of...
So they did it for the culture, not the cash. A proof of concept.
They did it as a proof of concept. And the concept worked. It proved that people will leave their house, fight traffic, and buy overpriced popcorn to watch Netflix content if it is treated like a real event. It proved the stickiness of their IP.
So even if the execution was legally messy, the math became undeniable. And now Netflix is admitting something interesting. I read they're admitting their own assumptions were wrong.
Yes, this is rare. You do not often hear tech giants admit their algorithm are off.
No, you don't.
But Sarandos and his team, they modeled the economics of Warner Bros. Theatrical business. They went in assuming it was a dying model, the way they've been telling us for years.
The fax machine.
The fax machine. But when they actually ran the numbers, looking at the per-ticket revenue versus the cost of customer acquisition on streaming, they realized, wait, this is a healthy, profitable business?
They realized they didn't want to bury the dinosaur. They wanted to ride it.
Exactly. They realized that the theatrical revenue engine produces billions of dollars of immediate cash flow that streaming subscriptions alone just can't replicate away.
That's a great...
Streaming is a long game of retention, of preventing churn. Box office is an immediate cash injection. They have these predisposed Silicon Valley ideas that digital is king, and the old school spreadsheet told them they were.
So they're looking at this cash cow and saying, okay, we won't kill it, we'll milk it. But there is another layer to this, which is the quality argument. Why does putting a movie in a theater for 45 days actually change the quality of the movie itself? Because I feel like I scroll through Netflix sometimes and it's a content slush pile.
That is the term. Content dump. It's beige. It's background noise. And this isn't just about creative talent. It comes down to cold, hard incentives. We have to talk about how actors and creatives get...
Okay, let's get into the skin in the game aspect.
In the traditional streaming model, the model Netflix really invented, payment is usually all up front. We call it cost plus.
Right. You are a star. Let's say you're a big name actor. You sign on for a Netflix movie. Yeah. They pay you a massive check, maybe $20 million, before a single frame is shot. And that buys out all your rights. No residuals, no back end.
Which sounds great for the actor. I mean, it's guaranteed money, zero risk. You get paid whether people watch it or not, whether it's a hit or a bomb.
It is great for financial security.
Cool.
It is terrible for motivation. If you have already been paid your maximum amount, whether the movie is a masterpiece or a total disaster, where's the hunger?
Right.
Where is the incentive to push for that extra take or to refine the script one last time or to fight for a difficult artistic choice?
So you get what the source calls a basic performance.
Yeah.
They showed up, said the lines, hit their marks, and collected the check.
Precisely. It feels like filler because it was made like a transaction, not a risk. Now, contrast that with the traditional theatrical model. This is where back-end points come in. And this is what Ben Affleck and Matt Damon have been trying to revolutionize with their production company, Artists Equity, right? They did this with their film The Rip.
Correct. The Rip is a perfect example of trying to change the game. It's a gritty crime thriller, but Affleck and Damon have been pushing for a different structure. They insisted on performance-based compensation.
And not just for themselves, right?
And this is the key, not just for themselves, but for the crew and the other work.
That is fascinating. So the lighting grip or the sound mix has a stake in whether the movie is a hit.
Exactly. When you have back-end points, you usually take a smaller fee up front, maybe just scale, but you share in the profits if the movie performs well at the box office. That creates skin in the game.
Yeah.
Everyone from the A-list star to the production production assistant wants to put their best foot forward because success is shared. It aligns everyone's interest.
It has to change the vibe on set, surely. It's not just, let's get this done so I can go home. It's, let's make this great because my rent and my bonus depend on it.
And that is what we have been missed streaming era. Look at the event model we saw with Marvel. You had stars like Zoe Saldana, Scarlett Johansson, Samuel L. Jackson.
And a fortune.
They made fortune. Why? Because their contracts were tied directly to box office performance. Those movies had to perform. The pressure cooker creates diamonds, or at least it creates very polished product.
And say what you want about superhero fatigue, but those movies were engineered to get people into seat. They had a level of technical polish and spectacle that straight-to-streaming movies often lack.
Right. And the hope, the silver lining in this Netflix WB talks, is that we can apply that high-stakes quality control to non-superhero. We want to move away from what the source colorfully calls traditional Hollywood superhero slop and get back to star-driven, high-quality dramas and thrillers and comedies that people actually care about.
But to get that back-end money, to make it all work, the movie has to stay in theaters long enough to actually make money. You can't just vanish after 3 days.
Which brings us to the mechanics of the box office. We need to talk about legs versus front load. This is the math of popularity.
Okay, let's define terms for everyone listening. Front-loaded is basically every Marvel movie of the last 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Huge opening weekend, massive hype, and then it drops off a cliff.
Exactly. That's the fanboy effect. Everyone rushes to see it Friday night to avoid spoilers on Twitter. By the next Friday, the theater is half empty. That is front-loading. It's a burst of cash, but it represents a very specific, limited audience. It burns hot and it burns fast.
And legs are the opposite. A slow burn.
Legs means the movie opens, maybe modestly, but people tell their friends. It's the water cooler effect. You go to work on Tuesday and say, hey, have you seen this movie? And week after week, the drop-off in attendance, sometimes the audience even grows. A classic example is Top Gun, Maverick.
Oh, absolutely. That movie just refused to leave theaters. It was there all summer long.
It didn't have the biggest opening weekend in history, not by a long shot, but it held the audience. It had legs for months. And looking at our current context here in early 2026, just look at Avatar, Fire and Ash.
James Cameron does it again. I remember people doubting him before it opened, which is always a mistake.
He really does. The source notes that Avatar, Fire and Ash is now well over $1 billion globe. But remember the narrative just a few weeks ago? The U.S. opening was soft.
People were calling it a flop on day 3. It's ridiculous.
And they were just wrong, because Cameron's movies always have legs. They have incredible international performance and week-to-week holds. A 45-day window, which Sarandos is promising, is the minimum requirement for a movie to develop those legs.
That's a great point.
You cannot build word of mouth if the movie is available on an app in your pocket 3 days. The urgency is gone.
That distinction is so important. If Netflix just dumps a movie, it never gets a chance to become a Top Gun or an Avatar. It just becomes another thumbnail you scroll past while you're eating dinner.
And that destroys the long-term value of the asset. A movie that hits $1 billion in theaters is worth way more on streaming later because it has cultural cachet. It's an event.
Right.
A movie that goes straight to streaming is just content, and content is disposable. Events are memorable.
So economically, the theatrical window makes sense. It builds value. It just took them a decade and tens of billions of dollars to figure it out.
Apparently so.
But let's look at the deal itself. $83 billion. That is a staggering amount of money. And not everyone is happy about it.
Merger drama is putting it lightly. This is a corporate battlefield. You have the proposed acquisition of Warner Bros., Discovery TV, Film, HBO Max by Netflix, but you have other players who feel left out.
And to David Ellison?
The head of Skydance and a major player at Paramount. The sources describe him right now as acting like a crazy ex.
A crazy ex.
Flip-flops.
That's vivid.
It is, but it kind of fits the behavior. He is reportedly filing lawsuits, trying to file injunctions, basically doing everything legally possible to stop Netflix and Warner Bros. From even talking.
Wow. He wants to be involved. He wants Paramount to be the buyer. He apparently hasn't heard the phrase, no means no.
But why is he so desperate? Is it just FOMO, fear of missing out?
It's survival. If Netflix buys Warner, Paramount is left alone in the cold. It accelerates the consolidation of the entire industry.
Okay.
Ellison knows that if this deal goes through, the gap between the big guys, Netflix, Warner, and everyone else becomes unbridgeable. He's watching the ladder get pulled up right in front of him.
But aside from the corporate jealousy, there are legitimate concerns here, right? The trade group, Cinema United, is sounding the alarm to Congress.
And they should be. Their argument is really simple. Consolidation leads to fewer movies. If you have 2 studios, Warner and Netflix, and they become 1 studio, they are not going to release double the movies. They are going to cut the redundant projects, the ones that feel too similar. Fewer movies means fewer tickets sold, which means theater closure.
And then there is the monopoly threat on the streaming side. I mean, Netflix is the #1 streamer. HBO Max is #3. You combine them and you it just crushes consumer choice. It gives them immense power over pricing. It's a valid antitrust concern. If you own the biggest library and the biggest distribution pipe, you can charge whatever you want.
And we can't ignore the human cost in all this. We talk about efficiencies and synergies in these business deals.
Yeah.
But what that actually means is firing people.
Always.
Yeah.
Synergy is corporate speak for layoffs. When mergers happen, the new owner keeps the employees they feel will be loyal, or, the ones they know. The rest, redundant.
Sure.
Marketing departments merge, distribution teams merge, HR merges. Jobs will be lost. The source mentions a preference that, ideally, Warner Bros. Would stay independent, or if it had to be sold, go to Paramount, where maybe the creative alignment is a little better.
Because Paramount seems more interested in making things people actually want to watch, whereas Netflix has that throw everything at the wall and see what sticks approach.
Right. Paramount is a legacy studio. They speak the language of cinema. Netflix speaks the language of Silicon Valley, of data points and algorithms. But, pragmatism rules the day. Netflix has the capital. They are the likely buyer.
Yes.
So we have to deal with the reality that this merger is probable, even if it's painful for a lot of people.
So we have this massive corporate shifting of plates. But I want to pivot now to the ground level, because while the executives are fighting over billions, the actual workers in Hollywood are facing something terrifying.
Yeah.
We need to talk about the production numbers for late 2025 and going into 2026.
This was the most shocking part of the research. You expect ups and downs at any industry, but the data from Film LA, it paints a dire picture. That's their word.
How bad is it really?
It is no signs of rebound bad. In the fourth quarter of 2025, production days fell 12.3% compared to the prior quarter. But the headline stat, the one that really stalks you in your tracks, the overall production volume for 2025 was roughly half of what it was in 2019.
Half. That's an industry collapse. That's not a slump.
It is a depression. We are in a structural contraction. If you are a camera operator, a set dresser, a driver, there is 50% less work than there was just 6 years. That means half the paychecks, half the health insurance contributions. It's devastating.
And what makes it so surreal is looking at what is actually getting made. Because you'd think with fewer movies, they'd be taking big, interesting swings on new ideas.
Yeah.
But instead,
the 1995 time warp.
Yeah. California allocated $771 million in tax incentives to try and jumpstart filming.
Huge amount of money.
And when you look at the list of projects that got the money, you have Jumanji, Heat 2, and Baywatch.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Wait, are we sure we aren't in a time machine? Jumanji came out in 95.
Yeah.
Heat came out in 95. Baywatch Nights was on in 95.
It feels like Hollywood is completely out of ideas. Or maybe they are just banking on apps. In a crisis, you retreat to what you know. You retreat to the brands that worked 30 years ago because you're terrified of losing money on something new. It's risk aversion taken to the absolute extreme.
Great. So we have these nostalgic projects.
Right.
But if the state is pumping nearly $800 million in incentive, why are the numbers still down? Why aren't the sound stages full?
Well, the delay factor is one part of it. Just because a project gets a tax credit doesn't mean cameras roll tomorrow. Approved projects have 180 days.
6 months.
6 months. So the money is allocated, the press release goes out, but the jobs haven't materialized yet. We're in a holding pattern.
And meanwhile, the sound stages in LA are just empty.
Because of runaway production, this is a trend that has accelerated massively. Filming is leaving California. It's going to Atlanta. It's going to Vancouver. It's overseas in Europe and the UK.
Sure.
The industry is decentralizing. LA is becoming a ghost town for physical production, while, the writing and the deals still happen in offices there.
That is a scary prospect for the local economy. But there is another shift happening in what those tax dollars are paying. It's not just scripted drama.
No, we are seeing a real rise in sub-reality. Historically, tax credits were designed to keep high-budget shows that employ hundreds of skilled union work. State, Westworld, or Succession.
Things with high production value.
Exactly. But now, large-scale reality is getting a bigger and big pie. TV comedy subsidies are at 30 drama, but reality, and generally speaking, reality cheaper and fewer shorter periods than a drama.
It feels like a race to the bottom, in a way. And looming over all of this is the shadow of the strike. We had the big strikes in 2023, WGA and SAG-AFTRA, and here we are in 2026 looking back. Did those strikes actually solve the core problem?
That is the really uncomfortable question. The consensus among many observers now is that the unions lost the battle regarding AI.
That's a harsh assessment. At the time, it felt like a victory.
It was spun as a victory, but look at the landscape. AI is encroaching further on Hollywood every single day. We are seeing AI used for background actors, for voice modulation, for pre-visualization, script analysis.
All over the place.
The contracts signed back then didn't stop it. They just put up some speed bumps that the tech companies are now driving right over.
And there is talk of potential upcoming strikes again, right? The IETC contracts for the crew unions.
Yes, but the leverage is totally different now. The industry is weaker. Production is down 50%. It is hard to strike when there's no work to strike from.
Right.
You can't threaten to shut down production if the studios have already shut it down themselves.
So if we connect all these dots, we have a massive merger that will likely cut jobs.
Right.
We have a production slump that has cut volume in half. We have AI eating away at the remaining tasks. And we have work being outsourced to other countries and states.
It is a very dark horizon for the traditional LA and the ecosystem that supported the middle-class Hollywood worker, the carpenter, the camera operator, the costumer. It's eroding. It's becoming a gig economy for the lucky few rather than a stable in for the many.
That is heavy. It paints a picture of an industry in a painful transition, perhaps even in decline. But we promise to look at the whole picture. Is there a silver lining here at all?
I think we have to circle back to the start, to Ted Sarandos and his 45-day window. The tension here is between the industrial collapse and the artistic survival.
Okay.
If, and it is a really big if, Netflix keeps that promise and they use their billions to market Warner Bros. As legitimate theatrical events, they might just save the habit of going.
So even if the industry that makes the movies shrinks, the art form might survive in its intended format.
Exact. It would be a possibly fatal loss for theaters to Warner. Think of Batman, the Wizarding World.
All the big franchises.
If Netflix bought them and shut down the theatrical distribution, theater chains would go bankrupt overnight. So, strangely, this corporate monopoly might be the only lifeline the theaters have left.
It is the ultimate irony, isn't it? To save the cinema, we have to sell it to the company that spent a decade trying to kill it.
A Faustian bargain, if I ever heard one. We will give you the 45-day window, but we own your soul.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this? If you are a movie lover, you might actually be entering a golden age of access. You might get high-quality films with big stars trying their hardest for those back-end points, playing on the big screen funded by Netflix's deep pocket. The movies themselves might actually get better.
But if you are a creator or a worker in the industry, the path is getting narrower and narrower. You have to adapt, or you might be left behind in the 2019 era.
Here is a provocative thought to leave you with. We always talk about the studio system of the 1930s and 40s, where 5 big companies owned everything. The theaters, the actors, the distribution.
The whole pipeline.
The whole pipeline. We spent 50 years breaking that up because we said it was anti-competitive and bad for America.
And now?
Here we are.
Now, if Netflix owns the studio, the streaming service, and effectively controls the theatrical window, are we just rebuilding the old studio system, but with Wi-Fi? And if the only way to save the movie theater experience is to let a streaming giant own it, have we already lost the war, or is this just the next evolution?
That is the question, isn't it? Maybe the war is over and we are just negotiating the terms of surrender. Or maybe, just maybe, this is how the phoenix rises from the ashes.
We will have to watch the box office and the stock to find out. Thank you for listening to this deep dive.
Keep thinking critical thoughts.
See you next time.